In the chamber this week, we're joined by filmmaker William Davis on a special episode about films, filmmaking, and horror. Will Joe and Cody be able to be professional with our very professional guest?
No.
Probably not, but it's cool. He'll join in the wackiness. All this and more on Fandom Roulette. Hey everyone, welcome to Fandom Roulette. This is Joe.
And I'm Cody.
And I'm William Davis.
Hey, welcome. Welcome to Fandom Roulette, everyone. This is a podcast where we talk about a myriad of nerdy things, including, normally, a little bit of history, some video games, RPG, but sometimes we like to do special episodes. This is a very special episode. Gentlemen, because we have two people in the room this week. This is Cody, what nerdy stuff have you been up to this week?
Nerdy stuff? Pokemon Go just came out, and I've been playing that for the hour that I've had it.
Pokemon Go?
Shit.
What? Did we transport?
No.
Did we transport as in 2016 again? Can we fix our mistakes?
No.
Can we Pokemon Go to the polls?
The other Pokemon Go Pikachu Eevee thing that came out for the Switch.
Oh, that one. That one actually looked really cool.
Just came out today, and so I've been catching Pokemon. I even got the little Pokeball with it, and it glows and it vibrates, and the little Pokemon like say shit in the Pokeball, and it's rad. And that's the controller.
Oh, that's so cool. All right, I just want to real quick. I'm going to go behind the scenes real quick. Before we recorded, we're recording this one a little bit early, and I made a joke if we were going to make it topical, and Cody's like, I don't know, how topical do you want to get? And then I referenced Pokemon Go. I was like, is this a bit? Are we doing a bit right now? Is it like 2016?
Anyways, super topical. I'm playing Pokemon Go on the phone. Have never heard of this before.
All right, William, what nerdy stuff have you been up to lately?
Starting Daredevil season 3.
All right,
a little late to the train, but I love season 1 and 2, and I think it's obviously the best of the Netflix series, and I've heard great things about it, so I'm diving in. So when I get the time, I'm gonna just binge straight through.
Nice.
I'm about halfway through. It's pretty good so far.
Yeah,
I heard Vince D'Onofrio crushes it, quite literally.
I also love the I don't know. Jess and I, when we've been watching it, I'm really starting to love Wilson Fisk even more, because you can't have a normal conversation with him.
Oh, no.
It's always just like, when I was a young boy, I went to the circus. And it's like, I just asked for your social security number. I don't need this.
That was really good.
That was really
good impersonation.
Marvel, if you're listening to this, Cody Morrell, I can.
Oh man, are we doing a reel right now? Ooh, look at that.
I love Wilson Fisk. I love that you can't just have a normal
no.
Are you comfortable back there? Comfortableness, it's so good. I'm loving this new this season 3.
It's the fodder of the masses. All right, so do you want fries with that or no? I'm just trying to do my job, Wilson. Please.
So good. So last but not least, Joe. What nerdy stuff have you been up to?
What? This is a private. I have been I'm watching television. I'm back on the Deep Space Nine train. I know I always say this every week, but I'm serious this time. I've watched 4 episodes in a row, so I'm back to my old Star Trek.
It sounds like a drug addiction. I'm finally back on the train.
I'm finally back on the train. A Ferengi made me cry, which is something I never thought I was gonna say. But just real quick. So recently I discovered 2 new musical artists that I think that our listeners would enjoy. The first is a gentleman named MC Lars, who is a nerdcore rapper. You can find him on YouTube, and his most famous song is called "Flow Like Poe," where he talks about how Edgar Allan Poe was the OG horror rapper.
Huh.
I know, right? And then the other one is a group called I Fight Dragons, which is a chiptune punk rock band that put on an awesome live show, and their album is good as well. A track, if you just want to check out one track, and if you like it, I would suggest "The Geeks Will Inherit the Earth." So, yeah.
I mean, accurate.
Yeah, it's true.
Accurate title, probably a good song.
Yeah, they make really good names.
Yeah, right? Yeah. All right, so as I mentioned in the studio this week, we have a filmmaker who agreed to come in and talk to us, and I'm really excited about it. Are you excited?
I'm super excited when I got when I got the video, I was like, I don't know what to expect. Like, I know it's scary, and that's usually not my jam, so, like, I'm gonna fight through it. I'm gonna fight through the terror, and, oh boy, I watched it probably 3 or 4 more times afterwards, because I was just like, so good. We'll talk about why I wanted to watch it again, but, oh boy, howdy.
So, yeah, it was good. So we're gonna send it off real quick to our guest William and take it away. So.
All right. Well, basically, the premise behind this whole thing, you're following your typical person that's alone, on a nighttime job, which is the worst case scenario. He's a security guard in a car junkyard, and we already know how car junkyards are already scary, but in their own. And he's by himself, and he sees an intruder on the security cams, and he calls out to this intruder, and this intruder turns out to be paranormal. And so the worst just happens, and as the story unfolds, it just keeps getting worse and worse. And so also one of the big themes of this short is also sleep paralysis. Okay. The intruder happens to be a shadow person. Ooh. So the mythology behind all of this unfolds in a crazy night with a guy who doesn't believe in any of this, let alone knowing it exists at all.
So yeah, as I was watching it, I was reminded of just one experience, but it hit a little home to me. Where in a previous job, it was the only night I had to do this. We had like an extended shift for certain people who wanted to sign up for it, where they needed to do work on the power grid. So they basically needed people to sit at the emergency exits because the power was going to be out. So I was singing in a room by myself, and I was singing about every show tune I could think of, and you would hear a pop, and like, I would slash, flip around and just like, so like just watching, I was like, no, I can understand how doing this for a little bit could get to you. So,
see, the only night I've worked graveyard shift, but I worked it at Target, so it wasn't like you're never alone. You always have another crazy person because I feel like one of the prerequisites to work the graveyard shift at Target is you have to be a little crazy. Okay, good. Maybe that says something about me. But the people that I worked with, we were all loopy. We're all waking up at like 3 a.m. to get to this job. Oh boy. But yeah, nothing scary, just like really weird, just.
But I think silence within itself and being alone, the solidarity, I mean, it lets your mind wander. And when your mind wanders, anything that could possibly happen gets worse.
Yeah. So, what were some of your, like, I guess, early inspirations when you were, like, working on the story or thinking about it, things like that?
Well, the earliest inspiration was actually myself. Now, I've actually never seen shadow people before. However, I have experienced sleep paralysis before. Okay. Where, you'll be laying in the bed, or on the couch or wherever you are, and then you just temporarily lose control over your body. You can't call out to anyone, you can't yell, you can't form words, and you're just stuck. You're paralyzed. And boy. In learning about this phenomenon, which actually I found is more common than you would think. Some people claim to encounter these beings. They feel like they see things out of the corner of their eye. Now, I've been fortunate to not have seen this. Okay. But people claim to see shadowy figures moving around the room while they're paralyzed.
Oh God, that is the most terrifying, like, real life thing that I can think of.
Exactly. And these beings are usually described as being shadow humanoid figures, sometimes appearing to have glowing red eyes. Ooh. And sometimes they move, but most of the time people, they describe them as observing. So people don't know what they are. I mean, are they demonic? Are they alien? Are they whatever? Because they fit the mold for all of those things. Sure. Right. So whatever these people are seeing, most of the time people they don't claim to feel any physical harm, but there are some people who have claimed to be physically assaulted. You know what I mean by these things. And it also ties into the mythology of the Hat Man as well. The Hat Man is pretty much a shadow person that looks like he's wearing like a hat with a brim. Okay. And a trench coat. So it's like a silhouette of a man in a trench coat and a hat. And so, but the craziest thing is that this phenomena has been reported all around the world by different cultures, different languages, and they all describe the same thing.
Guy in the trench coat
with the hat. And if not that, your regular humanoid figure, which looks like, usually it's a tall male like figure. And they just kind of stand there and watch. And that also ties into the mythology of like the night hag.
Okay. Which
is you see it a lot. You see this a lot more in movies, that iteration of it. But it's almost like that's actually more characterized as a woman.
Okay.
And they climb up on your chest.
No.
And sit on your chest. People describe it as sitting on your chest, and people, that's how they try to explain the paralysis aspect of it. People claim to actually feel like somebody is sitting on them and applying weight during the night. And so, so different cultures describe it differently in terms of the experience, but the similarities usually come from what they're doing and what it looks like.
That's crazy. I would say, just speaking for myself, if this ever happens to me, like, I would buy stock in Monster Energy drinks because I would just drink that nonstop and never go to sleep ever again. So, just run myself down. So,
and so it's, and from my understanding, from a scientific standpoint, our bodies release a chemical that paralyzes us so we don't act out our dreams. And so sleep paralysis happens when usually it's when you're falling asleep or when you're waking up.
Okay.
It's that transitional period between both. Because when you get stuck in between, your body will still be asleep, but your mind will be awake. So essentially it allows your sleep consciousness to fill the real space. So you might be looking at the real room, but now your consciousness, your dreamlike consciousness can fill that real space with whatever. So that's how people try to medically explain it. But
man, either way, that's fucked.
Oh yeah, very much so.
Not a fan of that.
Yeah, as far as I'm aware, my sleep, all I got's the snoring. That's about it.
Yeah, me too.
Well, that's good. That's definitely good, because from some of the stories that I've read, trying to learn more about it to put this into this.
Sure.
Some people's stories were terrifying about the things that they claimed to experience, and they're so involved. And I would just say, like, for the majority say that they don't do anything, but some people have, it's advanced towards them. True. It's touched them. Like, some people have claimed that it's tried to choke them.
Oh, no. Wow,
and so my biggest thing is, how do you explain that to somebody? You know?
Yeah. Now, I have a question for you, and maybe this is totally off base, sure. But so you mentioned that, like, the chemical prevents us from acting out our dreams. Mm-hmm. So in, like, you're studying about sleep paralysis or anything like that, have you discovered anything where it's like sleepwalking as a result of, like, the body not creating this chemical? Or
that's what I would think.
Okay.
That makes total sense to me that would be the case.
Yeah, for sure.
Because apparently we release this chemical so we don't hurt ourselves or put ourselves in a position to, act out our dreams. And sleepwalking seems to be just that.
Yeah.
So maybe where, it's an overabundance in sleep paralysis situation, it could be a deficiency in sleepwalking situations.
Sure. It's really interesting.
Yeah. I know there's a Netflix movie that I've been meaning to watch. I think it's called Sleepwalk With Me.
Oh, yeah.
With Mike Birbiglia.
Yeah.
Who's a comedian. Mm-hmm. And supposedly it's about, he sleepwalks, and it can be pretty brutal, and like it's his story of that. And I also really like Mike Birbiglia as a comedian. Like, he's super funny.
He's hilarious.
Yeah, if you ever have time, everyone go watch that.
Go watch
super funny.
The Tales from My Secret Private Journal or whatever. Yeah. Start with that one. It's hilarious. Good comedy talk on this horror episode.
Well, that's perfect, because comedy and horror are actually very similar.
Really?
Because they both rely on surprise.
Okay.
If you look at the beats of comedy and you look at the beat of horror, they're both meant to intentionally or unintentionally misdirect. Usually when a joke comes in, you have to set up for a joke the same way you have to set up for a scare.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
It's both are an experience, which is why comedic horrors work so well together. Because
I never thought about that.
You look at Zombieland.
Sure.
You look at any type of self-aware horror movie that has a lot of laughs, they work really well together because they're eliciting the same type of emotions.
Okay.
In the same type of way.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, actually.
And my whole brain is just unlocking right now.
Right,
Like I just leveled up.
and if you think about relatability, the most relatable characters do comedic things in horror movies because we all would. Seeing someone be scared when you're not necessarily scared is kind of funny.
That's fair.
So if somebody sees something, what's the first thing that people say? Oh, get out of there. Oh, not me. That wouldn't be me, right?
That's the reaction, right? Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so as an audience, we identify and we relate with these characters. And some of the reactions will be hilarious. If seeing somebody scream and run away, it's like people will say, "Oh man, he was a punk," but knowing they would do the same thing.
Yeah, right.
You know what I'm saying?
It's one of those deals where it's like, if I was there, I'd be the hero.
I'd be the hero. No.
I would be the first to die. I would be the guy completely oblivious to the guy who's literally behind me making way too much noise, and everyone's just like, "You gotta go," and I'm just like watching Netflix, eating popcorn. That's me.
Or I would be the cloud dust guy, where it's like my silhouette's there because I ran so fast that I just created my silhouette.
Exactly, right? But that's how we all would be.
Sure.
I mean, when faced with something that you can't explain, that we know nothing about, it's really hard to see how somebody would just rise to that occasion because we're typically not like that.
Yeah. Now that you mention that too, it's kind of interesting because the movie Get Out was directed by Jordan Peele, who came up in comedy.
Yep.
And he used like a lot of comedy sensibilities in that movie. Now that I'm thinking about it, it's like a very good scary movie, but he also I think in enveloping that humor in there helps to kind of guide the audience in there. So it's almost like a skeleton key to get the horror out. So
and it
like
is
that reference.
Yeah,
so good.
I mean, and if you look at creepy undertones, what happens when we get nervous? What do we tend to do?
I mean, I personally sweat a little bit. I kind of get down in my seat. I kind of tense up a little bit.
But even within that, we sometimes tend to kind of.
Oh
yeah, you try to reverse the effects that are happening to you. I do it all the time at work.
Right?
Oh no!
Right?
Yeah,
so
for sure.
It's that creepy moments have a weird sense of comedy in them. Yeah. It's almost like a twisted poetry.
Yeah.
Because going back to Get Out, going back to his experiences, it had that kind of Stepford Wives kind of vibe to it. And we identify with the main character, Chris.
Yeah.
And we're looking, it's like, oh man, they're acting so weird.
Yeah.
And you see him when the guy puts out his hand for a handshake, or the fist pound, but he didn't know what that was, so he put his hand on top. And he was just like, at that moment, it was like, yo, get out of there. That's it. He didn't know that? Get out.
You gotta go. You gotta go.
Have you seen Get Out?
I have not seen Get Out, but I've seen bits and pieces of it.
I will say, as a person who's not the world's biggest horror fan, I thought Get Out was great. So
that passes my smell test. I'll probably, honestly, I'll watch it at some point soon.
But yeah, so how long have you been filmmaking?
Actually, this film that we're talking about is my very first one.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
That's super cool.
Yep, my very first one. It was one of those things where I had been working with a friend of mine who had been writing scripts. He'd been writing full screenplays, and it's really hard to get your screenplay to the next level.
Okay.
And so usually you pitch it to a variety of different producers, but then they have the power to say yes or no. And it's a waiting game. So one of the things I was saying is, man, we just need to do something that we can have control over.
Sure.
What is something that we can actually do and complete? Because when you have something completed, now you have something to talk about.
Yeah.
And so that's what prompted it. And actually, I had the idea of the necessity of needing to create something came before I actually had the idea.
Okay.
And I steered towards horror because horror, from a filmmaking standpoint, is one of the easiest genres to make something good in that's cost effective.
Sure.
Because, once again, comedy is very similar. Dramas require you to, a lot of times, create this character arc or character driven or this kind of thing that needs to unfold. Whereas comedy and horror, it's more situational, where you're trying to elicit certain emotions, and generally you can do that without as much setup, without as much change of scenery in a shorter period of time.
Okay.
So
That's fair.
that's the reason why I decided to go into horror. And then once I decided, okay, I'm going to horror, what's it going to be about?
Mm-hmm.
And then once I found out what it was going to be about, through my own experiences,
Sure.
What's one of the most terrifying things that I've experienced? Sleep paralysis. What are some things attached to sleep paralysis? This phenomenon.
Yeah.
This phenomena, sleep paralysis. Okay, how can I make this? How could this be worse?
Oh.
Night shift security guard.
Mm-hmm.
One of the worst situations to be in.
Yeah, for sure.
It's
For
just so it's
something like
such
this to
it's such a good setup for something terrible to go wrong. Like
Exactly.
I'm thinking of like immediately like Five Nights at Freddy's and that whole phenomenon where it's like
definitely.
night shift at a fucking rundown shitty Chuck E. Cheese where the machines come out at night. Like fuck that, fuck all of that.
I mean, seriously, it's and it's an overnight job.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and actually, my sister's friend had a job like that.
Okay.
And so, and what actually made it the junkyard, the setting, was he was actually working in like this. This is what's even crazier. I don't even know what he was watching over. They were like the back parts of trucks, like like the storage part.
Mm-hmm.
It was a bunch of those on a big piece of property, and he was just there supposed to monitor it. At night.
Yeah. Well,
Super weird premise at night. Nope, gotta go.
and then the thing about that too is, so often with like security guards and things like that, or night shift security guards, is the fact that everything you're interpreting is through screens, and you're, as a person who's had to like look at those little screens, like one, they're just hard to pay attention to in general because so much is happening all at the same time. So your eyes are just constantly darting back and forth between the screens because you have, in the case, anywhere from, 2 to as many as like, 20 or 30 if you're in like a big museum setting or something like that. And so you have to be constantly monitoring it, and then suddenly what could have just been like a little flash, now your brain is thinking, well, wait a second. I wasn't expecting to see that because it's nighttime. Mm-hmm. What happens now?
And here's the difference there. Usually when we're looking at television and we see something creepy, it's like, oh, that's on TV, right? So you have that same experience when you're looking at monitors, but at the same time, now you actually have an association with a location. You're looking like, I know where that is. This scary thing that I just saw, that's right out there.
Yeah,
right. Oh.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
I know where all of these locations are.
Well, and I think that too, the fact that you kind of track it in the initial. So as you're saying, like you kind of get a feel for the space of things. Like that's something I've been noticing in films a lot more as I'm getting older. Is like how well do they establish the space, and then how good is it at reminding you of space later in the film, which I know sounds like a very nerdy thing to pay attention to. But it's like, if you ever watch a movie where it just cuts to a random scene, you have no idea where you are, and what's up with that? So,
right.
Yeah,
that always drove me crazy in movies where I'm like, where the fuck did we just go?
Unless, at the bottom it's like, and it says...
that always drives me crazy.
Really?
Too.
You don't like when they do that?
No, it's like Arkansas, and I'm like, cool, why? I don't care. Like, unless that's very relevant to the plot, I don't care where you are. Show me the backdrop of the cool area you want me to go to. Like, I don't know. That feels... I don't know. Like, I think of that and, like, narration, especially when, like, you could have told it in such a different way. Like, I loved it in the short where this is a night shift security guard, and this is him. Like, you didn't need any of that. I got it immediately.
Yeah.
And that's good storytelling.
For sure.
Narrating is just an excuse to not work at what you're doing.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And then too, one of the things that I've learned from watching all the things that I've watched and even the films that I've enjoyed is that, exposition, through dialogues a lot of times is unnecessary. How much can you tell a person through just showing them things? Like you can show two characters' relationship without even having that to, needing that to be explained.
Yeah, you mean you don't like, hello, Joe, my good friend who also runs the podcast with me. Well, how was your trip to Venice the other week? Like, that's such an odd, that is the weirdest conversation to have. Like, you can just, there are easier ways to have, to reveal your name, what you do,
Exactly.
Yeah, that's how human beings talk. No one talks like that. That first thing, Cody.
But right. I mean, because the goal is to not take people out of the world you're creating. And the way you keep them there is by being as realistic as possible. Yeah. And you keep that realism by doing things that people actually do. And so when it comes time to reveal something, you can tell that you guys are great friends just by regular conversations.
Sure. Yeah. There's like a tone and things like that, I'm not putting, we're not putting on quote unquote server voice or customer service voice.
Right. Hi, how are you?
Exactly.
Well, hey there.
Right. I mean, all of those things, those small are big.
Yeah.
You can tell a lot. I mean, even how you might be on the same wavelength. Same thought process.
Right.
Knowing a joke before it comes.
Yep.
Oh, fair enough. Yeah.
You get each other's humor. Those things tell a lot without even having to say, "Oh, this is my friend of 5 years."
Right. We are really good friends for 12 years.
12 years.
We also go on vacations during the summer.
Yes. And many adventures were had.
Yes. Do you remember the time we did the thing where it's becoming the plot point soon? And we murdered someone on the side of the road, and then that's how
Well, I think a good example of that kind of writing, just to be a voice in the the myriads is the dialogue specifically from Attack of the Clones in the prequel trilogy. Where there's because there's that scene where they're in the elevator together, and it's like, remember when I saved you from that pack of sci-fi thing, and then Anakin's like, I wouldn't have had to be in there if it weren't for you coughing too loud, and it's like,
and that sounds like a better movie than what we were given.
Sure. Yeah. Exactly. Well, it's I'd much rather see that because that establishes that you're friends.
Right. And how different is that than previously on this episode of this and this?
Yeah. Right.
Right.
So I have a question. How long was your shoot?
The shoot we shot it in one night.
One night.
Wow. And
that's even more impressive.
Right.
I will say from a production standpoint, if it had went on more than a night, that would have made the budget even more. So it's just kind of we gotta get this done.
Sure.
In one night. So, and we were fortunate that the crew was very, very helpful, and they really stuck with us, and so I was very happy about that.
Excellent.
And but yeah, it's a short. So I mean, I can only imagine how a full length feature situation would go, taking sometimes months to shoot.
Sure.
Right. Crazy.
I know. You hear about these things sometimes, right? Where it's like, oh, principal photography took 107 days or whatever. And you're sitting there and it's like, you kind of math it out. You're like, oh my God, that's so many months of just principal photography.
That's crazy.
Let alone now you have to come back in for another 40 days, which is another month and change. It's crazy. So,
and then wearing the producer hat, that gets expensive. Like that one night that it took was very expensive.
Sure.
So I think about, because everybody they charge by the day.
Okay.
So it's one of those kind of things where it's like, if it's taking months, then I'm just multiplying what we spend.
Sure.
Yikes. Oh boy.
Yeah.
Welcome. It's time for us to talk about social media. It's the middle section. Blah. Hey everyone, Welcome to the middle section.
I can't believe that that's what you went with for
Hey
the
man,
transition.
I was supposed to do something spooky. I panicked. I didn't want to do like a parody of the Halloween music, so we're going with Bad Dracula.
And now I'm going to put in Halloween music behind this.
We're talking about horror, Cody. So anyway, guys, welcome to the middle section. This is where we talk about our social media. So if you want to join in on the conversation, there's so many ways that you can do that.
Yeah.
Now the one that everyone can see is we do have a Twitter account.
Yeah.
Which is fandomr_podcast at the Twitters.
Yeah.
But there are other ways to talk to us too. If you want to ask us like a specific question, or you just want to talk about how bad that Dracula impression was, and you don't want me to hurt my feelings, you can always send us an email about how bad it was. Hey Cody, what's the email that you can send it at?
You can find... I can't handle it. You can email us at fanroulettepodcast@gmail.com. Not the thing you said last week. That was really wrong.
Yeah.
You can also find us on our website at www.fandomroulette.com.
Ooh.
It has our bios.
What?
It has all of our episodes on there.
How episodes? There's
Yeah.
more than one?
Yeah.
How long have we been doing this?
We've been almost...
I think it's a little over
It's a little over a year.
Because I think our Halloween episode was like our 4th episode last year, something like that.
You're right.
Yeah, something like that.
But also at the bottom of the website, you can send us stuff without having to reveal your email if that is something that you are concerned with, if you want to get in on this conversation.
Sure.
We're also on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Whoa, Google Play?
Yeah.
What are they playing?
They're us.
What?
They're...
Alright.
Play us like a damn fiddle.
Oh, really?
Right.
How does that work?
You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Tumblr, Fandom Roulette.
Yeah. Do you have anything social media to pitch, William?
Yeah. Actually, we have a website for the film.
Okay.
LookTwiceFilm.com.
Awesome.
Nice. And if right now we have a form to sign up for a newsletter, so
cool.
As new information comes out, you can get it by filling that out. And also, I have Instagram, William Davis Art.
Very cool.
Instagram.
Nice.
Excellent.
Very cool.
And as always, I'm sure you've listened to podcasts before, but if you rate, review, and subscribe, that kind of helps out our numbers, moves us up charts, tell a friend, all that good stuff. We'll say this again at the end, but I like saying it during this section as well. And then, like, now cue, like, scary organ music,
Now I'm gonna have to type in Creative Commons scary organ music.
Or you can just do what I just did and like not actually cut in any music at all and make me sound like an idiot.
I'll just change the pitch and make it slower. It's not the first time I've done that.
Oh, really?
Nah.
It's almost as if I don't like listening to the sound of my own voice. But anyways, we're back.
We're back from the middle section, the horrid middle section that we just did.
It was amazing. It was A+ middle section.
Yep.
So anyways,
yeah, quality podcasting.
Quality podcasting. Only professionalism here.
Yes.
All right. So yeah. So do you have any questions, Cody?
Besides sleep paralysis, was there anything else that like inspired you to go in this direction, or like maybe something in like the horror genre that like helped with like a scene or something that you were like, oh, like I want to capture that.
I want to do that.
There was one of the things that I liked a lot was the movie It Follows.
Okay.
I thought that the thing that was really unique about that movie, which I appreciated, was the fact that there was a lot of ambiguity to the actual creature, monster, whatever, right? And that ties into that whole thing about even the shadow people. There's still a lot of ambiguity. We don't, you look at zombies, you look at Dracula, right? Mm-hmm. You look at werewolves. I mean, there are a lot of things that we know about those things now.
Yeah.
Whereas these creatures that are still shrouded in mystery, mm-hmm. they're a lot more scarier because we don't even know how to combat these things. Yeah. And I love the way that how It Follows didn't necessarily there wasn't a resolution.
Okay.
Yeah, just the end of it, well, spoilers for It Follows, I guess, is like nothing, like it just continues to do what it's doing. Like it's, for lack of a better term, it's fucked.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And so
I see what you did there.
exactly, right? So that's, those kind of things I think are the most inspirational, because
Sure.
I think that that's where true horror lies. True horror lies in the unknown.
Yeah.
The less you know, the more scary the thing generally is.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
We were talking a little bit about, before we began, about like creating cool creatures and cool creature work and things like that. And I don't want to talk specifically anything about your short, but I think that one of the things that I've read about, like the problems with horror, is it's almost too easy to create creatures these days, and sometimes it's like, the one everyone points to is like the CGI like wide mouth ghost, and I'm sure everyone at home knows a certain level of what I'm talking about. And one of the things about like older horror genres or things that were made kind of on the cheapest, sometimes they wanted to like hide or like obscure like what their creature looked like, and in so many ways that makes it so much scarier, because the human mind is really good at scaring itself. And so it's like, if you give an impression of what a thing is going to look like, then your mind starts going crazy on it. So like, if I could give a quick example, I started watching The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina on Netflix.
Is it any good?
I'm enjoying it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've heard great things about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I love Miranda Otto, who played Eowyn in Lord of the Rings.
Okay.
And she's in it, so I want to support her career, keeping it happening. But, so like in like the one from when we were kids, like the wisecracking cat, who was just like a Muppet. So apparently in the comics, he's like a cat form of a demon. And in Sabrina, you'll see like maybe like an eyeball and like the tip of his tail behind like a door frame. And then cut, and you're with a cat. And so it's like, you don't know actually what Salem actually looks like. And so,
okay, that's
interesting. It starts to build in your mind. And then there's like another scene later on in the first episode too, where Salem jumps in to save the day. It sounds like a goddamn like tiger like mauling a creature, and then he comes around the corner, it's that little black cat again. And so it's like, you don't know how big or how small Salem is. You don't know if, it's like a gigantic thing that's the size of a doorway, or a little thing that's like clinging on the door, like the corner of a door, like an imp. And so it's like, for me personally, like now my brain is figuring out like, well, what are the dimensions of this thing?
Exactly.
Right? And I think that that's so much scarier than just being like, hey there, I'm Salem. I'm like 5 foot even, and I have huge claws.
Right.
Right.
I think a perfect example of what you're describing is it. Look at Pennywise.
Sure.
The clown isn't even its true form.
Yeah.
Its most iconic form isn't its true form. It's described as being something much, much worse.
Almost beyond our comprehension, right?
Beyond our comprehension. Exactly.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see how the sequel handles
Me
that
too.
thing.
Oh
right?
man.
I bet it's gonna be awesome, actually.
I haven't seen it.
Damn it. You got me, Cody.
You like that?
Yeah. I mean, I was surprised that I saw it, because I'm not the world's biggest horror person, but I saw it.
Nice.
So yeah, it was pretty good.
How was it?
We're just gonna ride this bit till it's death, huh?
It's already dead. Just gonna keep beating that dead.
Good. All right. You know what? It was the kind of horror I like, which is similar to, in my opinion, the horror of like Get Out, and the horror of, well, I haven't actually seen It Follows, but I've read about it and I've heard about it. And my friend and I are actually compiling a thing where I'm going to watch some horror movies to figure out like what scares a horror weenie. It's going to be called The Weenie's Guide to Horror.
Okay.
Well, that's the thing. It's what my friends and I do. But the thing with it is, there were moments that were like jump scare-y, but I don't like jump scare after jump scare after jump scare. It was one of those deals where it's like you could feel that slow build to it, and I feel like it earned it, as opposed to, just like You know,
right? The you know the smash on the violin, like someone just smashed
Right.
it, and then it's like, oh, the cat knocked something on the ground. What an asshole!
Yeah. And that's so that's actually one of the reasons I don't like jump scares so much, is because like I really get into soundtracks and music.
Mm-hmm.
So just listening to that one single violin note rise and rise and rise and rise and rise to that chord just like always gets me.
Now,
So
there's one movie that the movie that I don't know why the name is slipping me now. It's the one that just came out. Emily Blunt, her husband John Krasinski.
A Quiet Place.
Quiet Place, loved it. And A Quiet Place is actually the perfect film to bring up in this section because A Quiet Place, literally most of because the creatures, they hunt via sound. Mm-hmm. So in order to survive, you can't make sound. So there are huge portions of the movie, and this isn't spoiling anything. Mm-hmm. There are huge portions of the movie that are very quiet. Mm-hmm. So that makes you extra sensitive to the smallest sounds. Somebody in the theater could drop something behind you. You'd be like, oh, you know what I'm saying?
don't you know the rules is going to get us?
Exactly. You know what I mean? And I think that's an example of a great use of that. But once again, it ties back into what I said before about the being able to kind of flood it into reality. You know what I mean? Like if you can, the true horror is interweaving something feasible into something like, I mean, this might be kind of out of the pocket, but this isn't. You know what I mean? Like I can kind of buy this. What if that happened?
It has to have some level of grounding.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I actually think it's interesting that the idea of rules in horror. You know, like the best horror is the things that have rules. So like It Follows or A Quiet Place. So I know at the moment this is like just a short.
Yes.
But you mentioned that you're working on developing it into a bigger thing. Mm-hmm. So like, are you starting to like try to figure out what the rules of your universe are?
Yes.
Okay,
actually,
cool.
We have a first pass.
Oh, very cool.
So right now, I'm rereading through it and tightening up certain spaces and certain areas to just make sure, once again, trying to make sure things are grounded, make sure people are doing things that are feasible. The characters are actually like smart, not don't want to have them do anything convenient, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Want it to all play out as it would. Yeah. So I think that, that's really important, that grounded aspect of it. So yeah, that's where we are.
Very cool.
Nice.
Really excited about it. Let's see.
What is your least favorite aspect in modern day like horror films? Like what is the thing that grinds your gears
That's
the
a good
most?
question.
That's a great question. I would say there are a variety of things actually, but I would say, and not to say I'm an aficionado or anything like that, or I'm like the leading opinion, but I think that one of the worst things are the cheapness. Yeah. Like because a jump scare isn't real. It's like the music is startling me. Mm-hmm. That's what it's doing. Right. Like the actual content of what I'm seeing is not doing anything because most of the time, whatever you're seeing that's actually the jump scare is there, it's not even that scary. Right. You know what I mean? So the things that we're kind of used to seeing over and over again, they're trying to, utilize other things to try to create the experience. Yeah. Right. Whereas if you look at The Exorcist from like back in the day, people were more scared about the content. It's like, this is happening. You know what I mean? Yeah. Right. And so, we're getting away from the actual material itself being scary. And that's why the psychological aspect, it's the lack of psychological. I guess that's what I should say. The lack of, thought-provoking substance.
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah, it's all, I think the thing that drives me nuts now is how all horror movies now, they're just we've done so many that now it's like, all right, Truth or Dare, the horror movie, let's do it. And I'm just like, are you kidding me? Like that's your play. Yeah. Your play is like, we're gonna spend a lot of money doing Truth or Dare. No, better yet, Escape Room. The horror movie.
I was gonna bring that up.
Oh my god, I saw the commercial for that. I'm like, why?
I mean, it reminds me of I forget where I saw it, but it was like it was a comedy thing where somebody was talking about taking everyday average stuff and then making it extreme. So it's like, this is a guy regular fishing. But then every single time they would take the camera and shake it and put a guitar riff, and I'm like, this is extreme fishing. It's the same kind of thing. It's like you're taking something that's regular, but then it's just like, okay, how can we make this kill everybody?
Sure. Right. Like the theme park one that I saw commercials for that for literal months. Drove me crazy. It was it's like I guess I would equate it to like the Cedar Point like Fright Night or whatever. Where you go through the park and like it's like, oh, you have to sign a waiver to get in here because it might scare you to death. And they're trying to like up, like they're trying to make it like they're gonna up the ante. This is the scariest place ever. Yeah. But then there's actually a murderer in the place, and nobody believes them because it's like, oh, we're scared. And it's like, well, yeah, no shit. You're at the most extreme haunted house you could be in, and looked awful.
And you know what's crazier about that is there was. And this is something that films, I've seen this oftentimes. Lesser production companies will make knockoffs of the mainstream movies. Sure. And it will be like they've even done it with like Marvel properties. Mm-hmm. Where like literally they had like Metal Man. Yep. Huh. Where they would try to you see what I'm saying? Like there was Asylum.
My personal favorite is Transmorphers. So you just moved 2 letters around, friend.
I mean, but it would come out like just before the like real movie comes out. And that movie that you're talking about, there was another one that was just like that. That was like a knockoff of that movie before that movie came out.
I will say this: the one movie that I would be interested to see because I liked it was weird. It was one of those premises like this where it's like kind of mundane, a little like it's stupid, but I was so interested in it. It's the one about the Skype call. Have you seen commercial?
Unfriended.
Yeah, and like these shitty high school kids did a really shitty thing, and this girl killed herself. And then like her ghost is like infecting their Skype call and like forcing them to do shit. And like that seemed really like like a neat take on like a really like, well, what kind of dumb shit can we get these kids to do and murder themselves? And a great take on probably a very limited budget by making it like a Skype call and just like, they probably on purpose made it look a little shitty so that it would look like it was artifacting from internet rates and stuff like that, so it felt real. The only thing I didn't want to actually go and see it, so I looked up spoilers of the movie. Okay. They do the whole bit, spoilers for this movie that I can't remember the title of. Unfriended. They keep it going all the way to the end. Like the Skype call, everything, and like, there's 2 people left, and then that second person dies, and then it's just the last girl. And then they finally have her close the screen, and that's when the final jump scare of like this like ghostly corpse Big like mouth. Jumps out at her, and I'm like, man, could you have rewind, stopped right there, having her just weeping in tears, and just cut to black, and that's the end of the movie. Like I think that final like, oh, big ghost comes out and scares you, like it's so cheap. It's like
it cheapens it.
Yeah, for sure.
It does. I agree.
Yeah, real quick. Speaking of like the like game room or escape room phenomenon,
right?
I'm going to reference a time I was funny on Facebook. It's like
okay,
like one of a handful. Where I was like, guys, remember when everyone was complaining that they turned Battleship into a movie? Well, now they're turning the Ouija board into a movie. So don't we all look like idiots now? And I was like,
that's another one.
Ouija, and I'm like, oh, that game that girls play at that people play at slumber parties.
Hey, my mother has a Ouija board in her basement somewhere.
Okay.
By Milton Bradley. Because Milton Bradley has... I always thought it was so strange. People are like, oh, Ouija boards
real?
it's real. And it's like, because Milton Bradley's like, you know what we should do? We should produce a board game to contact the dead.
It's true.
There was like some guy at the board meeting is like, why don't we just summon Satan? And they're just like, brilliant, Jeff! You deserve a raise.
I mean, hey, but like, look at Jumanji, Cody. like people made board games that took Robin Williams into Jumanji. So
to be fair,
I guess you're the fool
that
now.
was the first time that they had introduced like a kind of mundane concept, and they worked that.
Yeah,
they worked it so good. Like,
see, you went to the opposite end of the bit where I'm saying that that Jumanji actually took Robin Williams into the Jumanji, so the Ouija board is actually contacting the dead. Hey everyone, welcome to the new section called Behind the Bit, which I might have stolen from another podcast, but I don't actually know. Cut that.
no, that's staying in now.
Are we tripling it?
Oh, we're in
We're doing
triplicate.
it.
I'm
We're
going to
doing it
just
3
have
times.
you repeat that 3 more times.
Nice, I like it.
Yeah.
Very-
So, Joe,
Yo,
what is your least favorite horror like trope or thing that we've seen in modern day horror?
I mean, it's just that build up to the jump scare. Like, it always gets me. And like I said, I'm a bona fide like horror weenie. Like,
I am too.
I don't like. And so like, it's funny when Cody was like, "Hey, like, I'm super excited. Like, we're gonna be talking to like this awesome guy. He's like a filmmaker. He's just a coworker." I'm like, "Awesome." He's like, "It's a horror short," and I was like, but then I watched it. I was like, "Oh, okay, no, this is the kind of horror I'm cool with," because our friends like slowly building me into it. But yeah, just like those cheap jump scares where it's just like, "Whoa!" And then I have seen one of those Paranormal Activity movies.
I saw the first one, I think.
And it's one of those deals where it's like you're watching nothing for so long, and then it's just like,
and then it finally happens.
and then it's like the basket swings, and it's like the basket swung.
You know what the worst part? They made multiples of that movie. Like,
oh yeah,
like I'll give it a pass on the first one.
Sure.
They got me good. Like, they made me watch dumb, like a chair falling over.
Yeah.
You got me. You got me watching a chair fall over, and that was considered entertainment.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Fool me once, shame on me. Fool me the 6th or 7th time.
7, I think. Because
and there's like a story there.
Yes, they started developing the mythology of the Paranormal Activity universe.
Right, which is like this very specific like family or something that died, and then they like just keep haunting the same like
half of them were like warlocks or
right.
something.
Yeah, they bring
in
in like a
coven, and like Satan's there, and then like Mr. Scary Face or whatever.
Right, like that's so bizarre to me. Like, how did they get so far?
You know, another one too like that is how many Saw movies can you make?
Right.
Like,
you know, and I really liked the first one. Like, that was just such a fucked up concept. Like, this dude, super smart, super intelligent, decides to become the world's craziest serial killer.
Well,
that was so, like, because it reminds me of, you know,
it's plausible,
right?
Yeah, it is. I think so.
It's a very well. It's plausible, but it's also like a very like comic booky premise, right?
Right.
Where it's like, hey, you have all this brilliance and all of these skills, and you can use it to save the world. It's like, no, I think I'm just going to mess with people.
Right. And that was like the weird thing when they tried to justify it, like, because he finally tells the story of how he became Saw in one of the movies, where it's like, man, a tree fell on me, and I had to pull a tree out of my body, and that's how I became a serial killer. And it's like, oh. Well,
then there was a whole lot of cancer where he had cancer, and it was like...
Right, and that was a whole plot point, and then he died, and then he came back?
There's like 4 more, and it's like...
Well, right, because
who's his apprentice?
Right.
And it's like, I don't care. Like...
Man, because like sometimes it would like... Because I watched, I think, like, Saw, like, 5 or something. Like, I saw it on TV, and I was like, well, I guess I'm strapping in for this garbage. And there was, like, this weird, like, all of the traps have gotten ridiculous. Mm-hmm. Like, I remember when it was just, like, a pit filled with needles and, like, something, like a bear trap strapped to your head. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden it's like, here's a furnace that has like an oven that's turned on at the very end with a key in it. And if you have to get past the razor wire that's covered in, you know, jagged points. And if you can get to the end, get the key up, as soon as you pull the key off, you just turn on all the jets in there, and then you got to get back out. Like, It's ridiculous.
I will say I was pretty shocked at the twist of the end where it was actually just the host of Double Dare the whole time.
It's just Mark Summers.
The way you were describing that, I was like, that sounds like a Double Dare challenge. Actually.
Oh my god!
And with what all this is like too is it reminds me of Final Destination.
Oh yeah, Final Destination.
A prime example.
Yeah, it's a prime example.
Prime example of just watching teenagers get murdered.
Yep.
And not even by a person, just like, well,
Destiny.
we're gonna have a kid choke himself in a bathtub. A girl gets hit by a bus, plane crash, whatever. Fuck it. The second one with like where like the whole premonition thing was the highway and like that whole logging truck for some reason that hit way more at home because of the fact that it's like I drive by those trucks all the time. Fuck that.
And I think that like the actual like Final Destination series, it actually has a really interesting premise. Yeah. Now, obviously, when you start going like 5, I don't know how many there are now, but when you start going so many, you start to kind of...
I'm trying to remember what the last one was.
Was the Final Destination actually the Final Destination, or did they make another one after it? I'm trying to remember.
Wait, like, did they make another...
There was one that was titled The Final Destination.
Oh.
And I think that they might have made another one after it, so it's like liars.
Well, so spoilers for Final Destination 1, because this ties in. The main guy lives at the end of all that. Like, you supposedly, like, he's cheated death or destiny or whatever, the cosmic ley lines or whatever you want to call it. And then in another movie, they bring him back up. Like, oh yeah, this guy, he had a similar experience. And then they showed him, like, in the most, like, without being a padded room, like, he hit himself in a log cabin in the middle of the woods with cameras always on him.
He went completely insane.
Well, no, what ended up happening is he ended up dying. Oh. And so, like, that was the plot point, was that everyone's going to die. And I think that's what ended up happening is these 3 people among many get caught up in a fire or something. And so these 3 kids make it out at the very end. And then that kid remembers that point and is like, what if Destiny wanted us to be in this cafe having this meeting just so that he could throw a semi through the building? And that's when the camera, like, blurs them and you can see a semi coming, and that's how the credits end with like the Mortal Kombat like bone structure and everyone getting blasted by this semi going like 80 into this like coffee shop. And I'm just like, fuck.
No, I mean seriously, I think once again that has that same type of, I mean the overall, because I saw somewhere that the original creator actually meant for that concept to go into like an X-Files episode.
Interesting.
But
I would have loved that. I watched all of X-Files.
But the concept of cheating death, I think that's one of those things that we mentioned earlier, where it's kind of like that's kind of heavy.
Yeah. Okay, so I have 2 quick questions for both of you.
Yeah.
Or 2 quick questions, or 1 quick question for both of you, then 1 question just for William.
Yeah.
Just right off the chest, favorite horror movie.
I would have to say, I don't know if it's like recent bias, but I really like Get Out.
Get Out, right?
And I actually really like the Hereditary.
Okay, cool.
Shoot, and a Quiet Place. Dang,
it's a hard question to come up with real quick, but it's, it's like I was just curious, because I think that's interesting too, because kind of shows like what your sensibilities are, and maybe what people can expect when they check this thing out. So, Cody, you got one off the top of your chest?
Yeah. So I had to think
of your chest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I see what you did there.
That was wrong. It was bad phrasing.
So I decided that with this answer, I had to have watched the entire movie and not just like spoiled it for myself or what have you.
Sure.
28 Days Later.
Okay.
Oh yeah, really.
That's a good answer.
Yeah. I mean, I know it's kind of blurring the line between like a zombie flick and I don't know. It's got a little more action in it than like your standard horror movie, I think. Mm-hmm. But I always like that idea of, because like the usual trope of zombies is they're slow shamblers, and like these ones are like No, I'm gonna sprint on you, and I don't quit. You do, I don't. And that just seemed terrifying. And the fact that it's transferred basically by anything that's like liquid based, like the spoilers for 28. Spoiling everything.
Gosh.
We're the spoilerists. It's our new tagline. But no, at the end where the old guy looks up and the crow is like chewing on a corpse and drops a little bit of blood in his eye and he just immediately starts to turn like, that's fucked.
Yeah.
Although 28 weeks later was pretty garbo.
I mean, it's impending doom. I mean, it's inevitable. You can't, eventually all of this is coming down on you.
Right. It's a force of nature. Yeah.
Yep.
I would say, it's going to sound a little basic, but Psycho.
That's a good one.
By Hitchcock.
Yeah.
Did not go into my basement for like a month after seeing it, even though I knew there was no old lady corpse down there. I was like, but what if there was an old lady corpse?
What if there was? I get it.
All right. And then last question for you, William.
Okay.
So, like, what comes next?
All right. Well, we're working on the feature.
Mm-hmm.
We hope to, once we finally get a script to the point where we're ready to, present it and pitch it, hopefully we can get it produced.
Very nice.
And as soon as we can get it produced, hopefully we can get it to all of you.
Excellent. So yeah, hopefully I'd love to at some point do a follow-up episode when, people can expect to see this thing and we can say, ha, we got him first. So, take that all other podcasts. But yeah, hey, I want to thank you so much for coming over. This was fantastic, a lot of fun.
This was super cool.
Thank you.
This is kind of like off of our normal format, and quite frankly, I kind of dug it.
As soon as Jess was like, "Hey, I've got the perfect thing," and I was like, "Yes, I want this. We're gonna fit this in for sure."
Exactly.
Okay.
This was really exciting, a lot of fun. Maybe we'll have you on again in the future. I'd love to have it. But yeah, should we wrap her up then? Or?
Yeah, this was a good episode.
Yeah, I think so for sure. So I want to thank you guys so much for listening to another episode of Phantom Roulette. As always, go back and check the middle section, but we can't for our social media and things like that. But as always, please rate, review, subscribe. We love emphasizing that. Share it to a friend. It's always a pleasure doing this. So signing off for Phantom Roulette. This is Joe.
This is Will.
And I'm Cody.
And as always, stay nerdy.
Stay super nerdy.